to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from DraftKings Studios with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in, you beautiful, beautiful people. Here we are. It is Tuesday, December 21st. It's getting a little nippy out there. Betz, is it snowing in Vermont?
Dude, listen, the snow model might be back. I mean, we got like 6 inches of snow on Saturday. What do you know? Jonathan Taylor, we thought it was going to be a down week for fantasy. He only has about 10 fantasy points. Boom! Snow has fallen. Jonathan Taylor, 65-yard run to cap off an awesome game. So we might have a new model, and it might be kind of going away from King Henry and onto JTT. We'll see.
Whoa, dude, how do you think Henry will feel when he hears out about this? Because he is probably returning in a couple of weeks, and I hope he just sticks it to you for that.
What if we have 2 running backs in the model? What if that happens? I mean, the DFS success we're going to have, listeners, quit your job. If we're going to rely on the snow to predict the success of 2 of the best running backs in football, I mean, easy game, right? Come on.
I mean, that's what this show is about. That's what our deep analytics are about, is to get you to quit your job. And if we've done that, then we've done our job. We'll probably still be working, still be doing our thing with DFS, but we are glad that you're with us. It is week 16. Well, technically, if you're listening to this still on Tuesday, we're still in the longest week that's ever happened in human existence for football world, but we're glad that you're with us. We're going to be turning the page, talking about week 16, talking about salary standouts, the state of the main slate, and how to just move forward from arguably the hardest fantasy football week any of us have seen. Our own Matt DeSorbo did some research and said this was the lowest scoring output since week 15 of 2018. So it's been years since we've seen a week like this, but let's recap our cash lineup and cash strategy this week. Where did people have to go? And if they didn't, how did they fail?
Yeah, a lot of the chalky wide receivers hit, namely Gabe Davis with a huge game, over 25 DK points. He was below 4,000 in pricing, so he was just a huge value. Kind of had to have him in cash almost. And then you look at the other wide receiver that was chalk, Devontae Parker. It looked a little dicey for a while there. Thankfully, he found the end zone towards the end of the game. And then, James Robinson kind of did what he was supposed to do. He was fine in a really good spot. So he was a solid cash game play. And then my name is Jeff. Jeff Wilson finally pays in when people were, we played him so many weeks in a row, it felt like, and he did nothing, but finally paid off there. So those were like the big names for sure in cash. It was a really tricky slate though, because, a lot of the quarterbacks that seemed like they were in really good spots failed. Like Kyler didn't do anything. Dak Prescott didn't do anything. So it was just one of those weeks where what you thought was going to happen, and this is clear across all forms of fantasy, did not happen. Hello, Duke Johnson.
It was a weird week. I think the quarterbacks really is the big thing, because you and I played Tua. We kind of landed on playing a Dolphins stack, which felt scary, but they were playing the Jets. And when Duke Johnson scored his second touchdown, I was like, I am ruined by a guy literally off the street. Like, that's where Duke Johnson came from. I got to give Bet some credit. He was all about it. Of course, did you play him?
Of course not. Of course I didn't.
Okay.
And you know who I did play? Myles Gaskin. Which in hindsight, it's always 2020 analysis, but in hindsight, coming off the COVID list, barely practicing, it was probably a silly play to play Myles Gaskin. But at the same time, like, did anyone think Duke Johnson could do this? I only thought he could if those guys were out. I didn't think it was going to happen if he was in. So, we can call Duke Johnson my rando of the week, but unfortunately it didn't work out because I didn't play him.
You didn't foresee Duke Johnson having the most carries in the first 100-yard rushing game of his entire career right off the street?
I mean, against any defense, no. Against the Jets, yes. I think legitimately, Kyle, you could be in the backfield. You could go over 100 yards on a score against that Jets defense.
You think you could just line me up in the power eye and I'm just the fullback dive over and over and over again?
Only if you're wearing the neck roll like Mike Allscott.
That'd be awesome. So I'll kind of end with this about cash this past week. There's a couple wide receivers that failed. Deontay Johnson was a huge bust, like just terrible. If you went him or Najee, if you picked one of those Steelers, that probably hurt your lineup. When Cooper Kupp went out, you and I both said I have to play Devontae, and he was fine, but very cost prohibitive. And if you didn't get those values in your lineup, like Gabe Davis, then you were probably, hit. But there were some obvious plays, like Devontae Parker was the most popular wide receiver, James Robinson, the most popular running back. And then it just matters. Did you avoid some minefields? Was it Myles Gaskin or Michael Carter gained a lot of steam? And I was fortunate enough to play Jeff Wilson. So it was a good week for me in cash and good week overall. Any notable things for you with GPPs? I had a couple that were close and in there, but man, I played a lot of Dallas stacks and that just didn't get there.
Yeah, dude, we need Dallas, man. Come on. We have that ticket for them to be the highest scoring offense on the year. Both of us do. And their defense needs to just stop it. Please regress. We need Dallas offense back. So that was a bummer. I played a decent amount of Dak. I also played a lot of Kyler Murray stacks, combining with Christian Kirk, which was solid, and AJ Green, which was not. And then I was really in on Chase Edmonds. I thought he was an intriguing GPP play coming off of the IR against an awesome matchup. And then you got exactly what you wanted. You got Kyler Murray in a negative game script against the Lions, and they just fell on their face. So it sunk me like a ship. I played a lot of like MVS and Mark Andrews like mini stack correlations, which I was really excited about. That was huge. But my quarterback play and running back play just fell off that. I was like right at the cash line or min cash. So it was like an okay week for sure. But by no means was I having a good week, I'll say, in tournaments.
Yes. And those little mini correlations, like you mentioned, like finding games that are lower in terms of total and finding the best plays. So MVS, if you played MVS over a chalky Devontae Adams, then you gain some leverage. And then if you played Mark Andrews over chalkier plays like Mike Gesicki or George Kittle, then you gained a ton of leverage. So that's the way to attack GPPs each week, and we'll get to do that. If you want all of our picks, FanDuel, DraftKings, you want some of our matchups for wide receivers, cornerbacks, if you want all of that, our Thursday night picks, you can find that in the DFS Pass. You can go to dfspass.com. It is stupid cheap, and if you want it even cheaper, you can use the promo code DFSPod. We are going throughout the playoffs, and we will get to talk about some of those smaller slates that have, 4 games on it, and those will be super fun. But let's talk about this week's main slate.
State of the main slate.
So a reminder, each week we refer to the DraftKings Sportsbook line. It's where Betz and I play. You can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com. And let's check in with a quick wager before we get into the main slate totals from DraftKings. I am feeling pretty good about a little ticket. I don't know if I told you about this, Betz. When I went out to Arizona a couple weeks ago, the Packers were on bye, okay? And I thought it was the perfect time to place a wager on the Packers to win the Super Bowl at plus 750. They are now the favorites to win the Super Bowl. So just a little edge here, a little edge there.
Moving the
do
lines,
what I do.
Moving the lines.
No, but it felt good because they were on bye. They weren't going to gain any steam that week. And so if you looked at their schedule, it was pretty easy. And then the next 3 games for the Packers, Cleveland at home, Minnesota at home, and at Detroit. That sounds like 3 more wins to me.
Sure does. Yeah, they're coming for that 1 seed for sure. So that's a solid one. How did the Raiders win 7 games this year? I don't know, but I'm thrilled. I forgot Kyle actually had an over 6.5 ticket on them, which through like the first 5 weeks was looking glorious, smooth sailing. And then all of a sudden they turned into one of the worst teams in football, especially with the Darren Waller injury recently. What a game last night on Monday against the Browns. I mean, if you fell asleep, you didn't miss much. It was just so bad. I can't believe they came away with a win, and they had to do it against Nick Mullins, but they got there to 7 wins. It cashes, and I think you have under 7.5, right? So like, if this just stays right where it's at, we're golden. Both of us win.
That's what I'm hoping for, is that it just stays at 7 wins. You and I just kind of get to bully the Raiders, and they play the Broncos this week, so they have a very winnable game at home. So I think Hunter Renfrow and your boys will probably come through. And then I'll just give you quickly, Kyler MVP was looking so good for the first half of the season. I got it at crazy odds. It was plus 1,900, and I've just written that one off. It's done, gone, not even close anymore. But Aaron Rodgers MVP looks like a pretty good bet if you wanted to get in on that right now. Give me one that's down for you.
Yeah, this is the same game, Cleveland, man. I feel like the AFC North was right there. They had a winnable game even with all the COVID issues that they had. Obviously dropped that one on Monday night. Now they're on the outside looking in, an uphill battle for sure to win the AFC North, especially with that matchup this week against the Packers. That should be rough. It's unlikely that they pull that one out against Aaron Rodgers. So not looking good for Cleveland, but we will see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
So yes, you can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com if you want to check in on any of those wagers or odds. The odds this week are maybe slightly more in our favor, but it's only just a slight improvement from week 15 when we look at this slate. We don't have any games over the 50 total. And if you just look at the NFL as a whole in the second half, it's just trended downward in terms of points per game, in terms of pass rate. It's been pretty rough, but there is one game that I would say we're excited to stack. So highlight that game for us.
Yes, the one that I think we're both excited to stack is going to be this Rams and Vikings game. It's the only one that has a total that's up there. It's at 49 points as of now. And then the rest of the slate, like, it looks kind of rough. I mean, we're looking at a bunch of games that are in that, 45-ish range of the total. So it looks like it could be another one of those slates where there's one game that looks good. The rest are kind of meh. And it makes it really tricky because in those situations, as we've seen in recent weeks, you get those sort of slates where there's no, real condensed, like, good plays that make sense. You can get some condensed plays that are a little bit fragile in terms of how they project. So again, I think it's shaping up to be a really good GPP week.
There are some teams off the main slate that is kind of dragging it down. So Cowboys, the Colts are a high-flying team, the Packers, and then even just think about the running backs. It's like there's no Jonathan Taylor, there's no Alvin Kamara on an already rough year for running backs. So keep that in mind as you're constructing your rosters. Like, a good scoring output for a running back may look a little bit shorter. So you mentioned James Robinson. Like, he did what he was supposed to do. He was the RB4 on the week. It didn't feel like that. It felt like, he was fine. RB10, RB11, but he was actually elite. And so that's all you're looking for on slates that don't have as many great running backs. But there are some teams with team implied totals. Any of those you want to read off?
Yeah, there's a good amount that are interesting, especially for really good offenses. Kansas City's there at 28.3. They are at home. They are taking on the Steelers. We got the Chargers, 27.5 against the Texans, which looks really solid. And then I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this Tampa Bay, 27.3. It seems high for an offense that's just depleted, obviously, with the horrible news with Chris Godwin and the ACL. Mike Evans in the hamstring, Leonard Fournette with his hamstring issue. I don't think we see either of those two guys play this week. So it seems a little bit high against Carolina, who's been okay on defense. So those are kind of the top, names of teams on the list with implied totals. And right below those, you got the Rams and the Eagles both sitting at 26 points.
Yes, I will agree that Buccaneers right now are 11.5 point road favorites. And I get it. The Panthers are a train wreck, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit more credit to their defense. And on this game, I mean, it only has a 45 total, but man, 11.5 points feels like a little too wide. I would take the Panthers and the points as it is right now. And especially if we know that Evans is out, that feels even stronger. But it's really clear that the Rams and Vikings is going to be the most popular game to stack because we have a Vikings defense that gives it up repeatedly. The Rams are number one in neutral pace. They're efficient offense. I mean, they're about to play tonight, so we're going to see them, but also their pricing is stuck. That's what's the beauty of the Rams is they had to do this pricing before. So God forbid, but if there is an injury to one of those players, then there's going to be an extreme value to one of the running backs, one of the wide receivers. So there's really a lot of value there. I mean, we know Dalvin's expensive. Justin Jefferson at home is unbelievable. So there's elite options there, and that's what's kind of driving up that total. But anything you want to say about that game, or is it just going to be so popular that you're just going to try to get weird and different in that game, or come in underweight?
I mean, on a slate like this, where you're looking for those high-scoring environments, it might just be a good spot to go to, even if it's popular. And the reason is because, we're going to have different spots to go to. Like, obviously, Cooper Kupp's going to be one of the best plays on the slate, as he is every week. Same story with Dalvin and Justin Jefferson. But let's say we get Adam Thielen back in the lineup this week. Let's say we have KJ Osborne without Adam Thielen. You got the tight ends there that can always go 45 and a touchdown, which might be good enough on this slate. And then on the Rams side, you've got Odell Beckham, who's fully acclimated into the offense now. Jefferson's looking solid. So I think there's ways you can get different in this spot, even though it looks popular. I'm probably going to play it, especially given how good the Rams have been. This game is indoors. You already talked about it with the Vikings struggling on defense. So it looks like a really good spot to attack.
And on Friday, our Christmas Eve episode, we will, I know, isn't that kind of exciting?
That is fun. I kind of forgot Christmas is Saturday, actually. This week's just been wild, especially with week 15.
We'll get to highlight that game, and I just think there's so many different plays that you can get different. So Cup's going to be chalky, but let's say you played Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and Tyler Conklin and brought it back with Cup. Then you're getting a little different. I think the other Rams wide receivers are going to be an interesting conversation. Is it Odell Beckham you want to play? Is it Van Jefferson? So lots of different ways to talk about that game, and we didn't even mention the running back. So that'll be a good game. And then you put on here Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Kansas City's 10-point home favorite. Do you think that game will just be popular because we just saw Kansas City go bananas? Like Kelsey and Tyreek had a ceiling game.
Well, I also think too, like when you look at the teams that are playing on this slate and you look at game stacking environments where you say, okay, I want to play the Chiefs. How do I bring it back on Pittsburgh? Like you don't need us to tell you what the Chiefs are capable of doing. We know they're capable of 30 real life points any week. So people are going to want to play Mahomes stacks, especially with like this Travis Kelsey situation with being on the COVID list. Let's say we're not sure what's going to happen as the week goes on, but let's say he misses. Tyreek Hill is going to be one of the most popular plays on the slate and say, okay, I'll play Mahomes. I'll play Tyreek. Who should I bring it back with on Pittsburgh? Oh, look, there's Deontay Johnson. So I just think it can get really popular and you can play into a lot of roster percentage. I'm not sure I'm going to lean that way. I think early in the week, a solid like contrarian approach to that game. CEH, Chiefs defense, move on. We've seen the Chiefs at home play a little bit more conservative. We've also seen the Steelers give it up on the ground to everyone, including Deonta Foreman and Dontrell Hilliard last week. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go there for a full game stack, but I think people will approach it in a very similar way, meaning you're going to play into a lot of roster percentage.
No, I like that call. In terms of sneakiest game, I need you just to, whatever you're doing, if you're listening to this and you're driving, you might need to pull over. If you are about to have a very important conversation with a friend, just wait, okay? Because I think a sneaky game this week could be Jacksonville and the New York Jets.
No comment.
Anybody?
No comment.
Let me just say this about these, and this is sneaky. They either really stink and you look at two offenses that are just really bad and they can't move the ball, or they're so bad at defense that it actually helps the opposing offense. So we picked on the Jets the entire year. Trevor Lawrence is crazy cheap. So we've seen him have a couple of ceiling games, especially when he started off the year. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen against the Jets, right?
Maybe.
I'm not saying do this.
I mean, listen, like you said, there's a range of outcomes. It is either just both are so bad, it doesn't matter how bad the defenses is. The offense are just so bad that it does nothing, or the defenses are so bad that the offenses actually look good. And I could see either scenario. So maybe it's interesting. But the issue is like on the Jets, who are you going to play?
Dude, come on. I don't know, actually. I mean, you're going to play Jamison Crowder. You're going to play Michael Carter. You're basically grasping at straws. So I'm totally with you. With Jacksonville, we know that James Robinson is going to be super popular once again. So it's basically saying, if you play this game, can you stack this game with him? Because James Robinson by himself is not giving you any leverage on the field. So I want to be able to approach this game and say, if it does hit the over, and it has the lowest total on the slate, 41.5. I get it. I do think there's some interesting value because the players are so cheap. I'm pretty sure James Robinson's the most expensive player, other than Zach Wilson's like a little bit like in that same price range, but James Robinson's $5,900 and everybody else is cheaper than him. So stupid cheap if you wanted to pay up elsewhere.
That's kind of incredible, actually. James Robinson's going to be one of the best plays on the slate as far as medium projection and cash game plays. You can lock that one in. The sneakiest game, I think, is Baltimore and Cincinnati. And really, again, this could go one of two ways. You could say, okay, this is an AFC North battle where it's going to be low scoring. But last time we saw these teams play, all the way back, and I think it was week 7 or something like that, it was 41-17 Cincinnati. And Baltimore has been really susceptible to these big plays. And what you need to happen in this sort of game scenario is Jamar Chase to hit a long one, or T. Higgins, or something like that. Because if the Bengals do what they want to do, they will run the rock with a combination of maybe less than 100% Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine, and really could slow the game down. But if they can push, the Ravens to have to kind of keep going, as we saw last week, Like Tyler Huntley did awesome without Lamar Jackson, and we're not sure who's going to start, but there's names that we like on the Baltimore side, especially with Mark Andrews and how well he's playing. Hollywood Brown is always capable of a pop-up spot here or there. So I think it's one of those maybe where you could get into like a little mini correlation, but you have to play the game script the way that it hits a ceiling outcome because, again, it's kind of one of those on a wide range of outcomes. It could be slow and low scoring, or it could turn into a higher scoring game like we saw in week 7.
I don't have the button because you and I don't really break news on this show because of when we usually record.
Oh, no.
But there was news that just came across that Tyreek Hill will be placed on the COVID list. So now, what we said about Kansas City, just take that, file it away, and hold on to it. So that game that's going to be a mess. And actually a source described it as it is a complete mess. We're not exactly sure how many other names will come out. So
did you just drop a source?
We'll see that right now. I did. It said source.
Okay. I was like, who are your sources, Kyle?
I plugged into some people on Twitter.
Yeah. Adam Schefter.
All right, next category here. Which game are you going to be underweight on?
Okay, yeah. So for this game, I'm looking at Seattle and Chicago, and what I see happening is Matt Nagy being Matt Nagy and Pete Carroll chewing on his gum in his Air Monarchs, running the football. And those two they're in a complete battle right here. Who can establish the run harder? Is it going to be Matt Nagy or Pete with Rashad Penny? And both are going to want to do that if the game is close. They're both bottom in plays per game. They're both among the bottom in terms of pass rate. I mean, Russell Wilson has thrown the ball 35 or more times just twice this year. So unless someone is pushing them to do that, they're going to be perfectly content to play this to like a 17-10 type of game. I want no part of this, especially with Chicago going on the road, playing against Seattle in a tough environment for sure. I could just see this game being completely gross, low scoring. No, thank you.
I feel the same way about the Giants and Eagles. Just feels gross when Mike Glennon / Jake Fromm are involved. I would say one of the things that killed me the most in GPPs last week was I played a lot of Cowboys on slot stacks, which didn't get there. But then I also played some with Sterling Shepard, and he unfortunately tore his Achilles. It's going to be rough for him to come back. So I just don't believe in the Giants. And I also can see the Eagles just going into cruise control mode and just running the ball and establishing it over and over again. So that's a game I just don't want any part of. Which team are you most confident hits the over of their team implied total?
Yeah, I'll take the Chargers here. 27.5 points against the Texans. Not much to say about the matchup. Obviously, it's awesome. And this is just an offense in general that we want to back. Now, this is a situation, too, to monitor. We kind of had like the maybe Austin Eckler's on the COVID list, maybe he's not sort of thing happen on Monday. I'm not sure where that's at, but we'll track the news as the week goes on. And so if you get, a full allotment of weapons for the Chargers, certainly they should have success this week against Houston.
I'm going to take the other team from Los Angeles. I just have so much confidence in the Rams against the Vikings. It just feels like an awesome smash spot, even on the road. But give me that dome game. I'm going to be overweight on Rams stacks and hopefully find different ways to stack up with Matthew Stafford this week. And then the team I'm most confident hits the under. I'm going to say the Giants. Like I mentioned, 16 points feels too high.
Yep. As it does most weeks.
It's bad.
It's so bad, man. The honorary mention, of course, we just have to say it every week, is the Jaguars. Again, it hit last week. I did bet it finally. We got there. But the real answer here, how are the Raiders scoring 22 points against Denver? I mean, Denver is not like an elite defense, but they're pretty darn good. And the Raiders have been atrocious since the Waller injury. Since Thanksgiving, like that game that they had a high-scoring affair against the Cowboys, they're averaging 13.3 points per game. Not even 2 touchdowns. How are they scoring 22 this week? Give me the under.
Let's talk about our salary standouts.
Salary standouts.
So these are our players at the beginning of the week that stick out to us. You can get our full official picks in the DFS Pass. And this week at quarterback, we have a couple of guys not available to us. Kyler, Aaron Rodgers, Dak, no Taysom Hill. So where are you looking at quarterback? Who's standing out to you early in the week?
Yeah, let's go to a team that has one of the highest implied totals on the slate. We just talked about it. It's the Chargers. So give me Justin Herbert, 7.2 against Houston. Just feels so incredibly safe for a cash game. We've seen this offense have success. They still pass the football a ton. And against Houston, they should have minimal resistance with that. So give me Justin Herbert. I think he's really solid this week at 7.2.
I like Stafford at a little bit cheaper. His price is staying there because they're playing tonight and they had to set it. So it's 6.7. If I can save $500 from Herbert and it's the highest total on the slate, I think Matthew Stafford is my guy. I do like Herbert a lot, but Stafford just feels pretty safe. And then if you want to go the running quarterback route, Jalen Hurts is kind of priced down at 6.4. And this is more of like a tournament play, but Justin Fields is really cheap. They set his price before Monday night. So at 5.2, we've seen some of his upside recently. He's running for 35 yards per game, and Seattle has given up the most passing yards in the league. So I like Justin Fields as like a cheap tournament play if you just want to stack him with one other person. If it's, I don't know, Darnell Mooney or another name that we'll mention in a second.
We'll see. I think that is interesting. For Fields, the way they get there is Seattle gets out to a big lead, and then you see what they did Monday night. He had to throw the football. So yeah, he was a fun play on that 2-game slate and for Showdown. For the running back position, I'm going to talk about a bunch of these guys in the 5K range. Let's first talk about Ronald Jones. How are you approaching him on DraftKings versus FanDuel? Because he's a guy that I struggle to click the button on, period. But he doesn't really catch that many passes, but he may be forced to because Keyshawn Vaughn has struggled in pass protection. I mean, with Leonard Fournette, assuming he's out, they've got a huge total. Are you going with Rojo this week? He's cheap.
I know you've always been against Rojo, and it actually makes a ton of sense because he's Rojo. On FanDuel at 5.4, that's way too cheap for his role. And the amount of touches he saw last year when Leonard Fournette was out, he was productive every single game when Leonard Fournette was out. You could have played him and gotten some yardage totals. He's a good bet to get in the end zone, right? Like if they have that team implied total, which we both said is kind of high, but let's say instead of 27 points, it's 24 and a half, 25. Like that's still really, really good as such a heavy favorite. So on FanDuel, I'm definitely playing him at 5.4. I think it's a different conversation on DraftKings because there's a bunch of dudes in the 5K range that we like.
Yeah, I think I'm with you as things stand on a Tuesday. The other names I'll throw out there, I mean, we can just kind of quickly mention it. You know, I know you put down James Robinson. I feel like unless anything changes, I'm almost locking him in right now as a cash game play. 5.9 against the Jets. We just saw Duke Johnson have a career game, and I can't even say that with a straight face. Oh my gosh. They're so bad. The Jets are awful. So James Robinson looks great. Below him, David Montgomery is interesting, 5.7. Like, I feel like he's always in that price range, and you know what they want to do, as we talked about, run the football. You can have success against Seattle. He's cheap, so I like him this week as a cash game play. And then I think more of a tournament angle. What are your thoughts on Miles Sanders? He's 5.6. The Giants are a solid matchup. The issue is, and we'll see them tonight on Tuesday, but like there hasn't really been that many games where all the running backs have been healthy. Recently, it's been, you know, Sanders is out, and then Jordan Howard's out, and then Kenny Gainwell is a healthy scratch. So it's like very easy to predict how the game is going to go. But if you're telling me Sanders gets 20 touches against the Giants at that price tag, that's really intriguing.
I am wounded by Miles Sanders, but I do like that price. I like the game environment in terms of them being heavy favorites at home. So I'll see how I feel later on in the week. I mean, like we mentioned, James Robinson already feels like he's going to be locked in everybody's lineup. CEH is also interesting. If let's say you knew that Tyreek and Kelsey were out, CEH at 5.8. How do you feel about that?
Awesome. Yeah, the Pittsburgh's been struggling on the ground, as we said, and that was the reason we were on Deonta Foreman last week. And CEH and this offense that has a nice implied total at home as a huge favorite. Yeah. I mean, if Tyreek and Travis Kelce are out, I'm not playing DeMarcus Robinson. Give me CEH.
And then at the very bottom, there's two running backs that potentially could be the free square this week. If Joe Mixon's out and he's got an ankle sprain issue, Samaje Perine is 4.4 against the Ravens. The Bengals earlier this year, I don't know if you remember, they demolished the Ravens. Like they beat them 41-17. It wasn't even close. That was the CJ Uzama game where he went for 2 tutties. And then what do we know about Austin Eckler? Like we've gotten some COVID issues. We know that he was banged up, didn't have the full allotment of snaps, but Justin Jackson was pretty effective this past week. He's 4.2 and they play the Texans.
Yeah, so there was kind of like a conflicting report that he was on the COVID list, but then it was like later after that, they listed all the players on the COVID list and he wasn't on there. So as of Tuesday at 3:00 Eastern, I do not believe Austin Eckler is on the COVID list. So monitor right now what's happening, but there is a little bit of a breakout of COVID on the Chargers side. So we'll need to see what happens as the week goes on. But I do think, another week out from the ankle issue, we saw him split time. But if you told me Austin Eckler was 85% of, his full recovery, even in this spot, it's an awesome matchup against Houston. So he would be great. But if for some reason he is on the COVID list and he's out, Justin Jackson would be one of the best cash game plays on the slate. Just so cheap, 4.2 on DraftKings. And as you said, we saw him be pretty effective last Thursday night.
On FanDuel, I'll mention two names. Dalvin Cook at 8.8. The Rams are a tough matchup, but he's also Dalvin, and it doesn't really matter. He can do what he wants to do. So he's a value on FanDuel relative. And then Javonte Williams is too cheap, I think, on FanDuel at 6.3. Leads the league in forced missed tackles, even though he has 100 fewer carries than Jonathan Taylor. So Javonte Williams is an interesting name, but I think Ronald Jones is probably going to be the chalk on FanDuel, and I think he's going to be a good play on DraftKings. I don't know if I say I have to have him in my lineup, but any chance we get a backup running back and we know how much Tom Brady in the offense can move the ball and the red zone opportunities, I think he's going to be the dude. But let's talk about wide receiver. There's three guys at the top pricing-wise. It's Kupp, Tyreek, and Justin Jefferson. If Tyreek's out, then it's really between Kupp and Jefferson. And, man, Jefferson's like $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings. So how are you handling that?
Yeah, I think my lean is just to try to find a way to get up to Cooper Kupp. I mean, we've just seen him be so incredibly safe for cash games and also have a huge ceiling to break the slate. And while Justin Jefferson, don't get me wrong, can finish as the wide receiver one any given week, we've just seen the bottom fall out with Kirk Cousins. I mean, Monday Night Football, what? Like the Bears literally down all four starters, both corners, both safeties because of COVID, and he had one of his worst games as a pro. So I just feel much safer about the Rams and about Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, I like Jefferson a lot on FanDuel at 8.4. He's a killer at home. Like if you look at throughout his career, he's just been unbelievable at home. He's averaging 100 receiving yards per game at home. So not bad at 14 game sample size so far. So Justin Jefferson and Kupp are at the top. We mentioned Deontay Johnson as kind of like a, if you want to bring it back, but maybe Kansas City stacks don't look as quite as enticing. He's hurt me, dude. I am taking this personal. Deontay Johnson felt like the safest thing you could possibly have. I've been calling him 90% of Keenan Allen the whole year, and you know how much I love Keenan Allen.
Oh, yeah.
But after that, he's 70% of Keenan Allen now.
I mean, listen, over the last 2 years, this guy gets like 12 targets a game. He has one game where he has a down week, and all of a sudden you're out. No way, man.
He's no Keenan Allen.
He's no Keenan Allen. Yeah, for sure. No, it's Deontay. I mean, the Steelers have been one of the worst teams in football in the first half as far as scoring. But when they get in the second half and they're trailing, as we saw like against the Vikings rather 2 weeks ago, when Big Ben was Andy's start of the week, he's forced to throw, and he has to. And who does he go to? It's Deontay Johnson. So I think it really depends on the game environment. You know, if we get Tyreek and Travis Kelce in, you feel a lot better about the Steelers getting pushed and Deontay Johnson's target share in those situations. So it really depends on what's happening in Kansas City.
Peel back the curtain about that Big Ben start. Andy put him down, and then we talked about it, and I filled in some stats for him. And then as the show went on, he goes, well, I guess I have to stay with this because Kyle put in some stats. So for that first half, when Big Ben was so bad, like so incredibly bad, I looked like one of the worst employees ever because I did my job.
You almost got fired.
But I know. But look at that now. Andy looks really smart. He gets the glory. Let's go through some names kind of in that middle tier. The Sun God, Amon-Ra St. Brown, is 5.6. He's in the slot against Atlanta, so that's a good matchup, and his target share has been elite recently. I tried to fade him this past week. It did not go well.
No.
So that means against the Falcons, he's totally going to dud. But 5.6 just feels too safe.
What if Jared Goff isn't playing? He's on COVID right now.
I don't love him. I wrote him up as a correlation play that if you wanted to play Cordell Patterson and Amon-Ra St. Brown as kind of just that's what you wanted to do in that game, it's fine. It's not the best game environment, but he feels safe, but his price is a lot higher than he was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, and obviously we'll know more on the Friday show.
OBJ is 5.3. Gabe Davis, he went up $1,000 and yet he still feels super cheap. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, he was 3.7.
Yeah.
We were playing him at 3.7 this past week. So he's a cheap name, but I think the biggest conversation point is Antonio Brown. So how do you want to discuss him?
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as understanding the injury situation for Tampa. I feel like it's unlikely Mike Evans plays. I mean, think about it. Like, they just lost Godwin. This is a team that is going to the playoffs. They have Super Bowl aspirations with Tom Brady. So are they going to rush him back for a game against the Panthers? I doubt it. So you could get Antonio Brown back into the lineup this week. Now, we need to monitor like what he's doing in practice as far as his injury situation, because we haven't had any news in the last 3 weeks with the suspension, but he is back. And if you told me AB was 100% healthy against Carolina at 4.9 on DraftKings without Evans, without Godwin, without Fournette, who, by the way, was second on the team in receptions. Did you know that? Above Mike Evans? I had no idea. They put that out on the Sunday night game. So if you're missing all that volume, I mean, AB, how do you not play him in cash at that price tag?
I kind of like Tyler Johnson, though. He's $1,000 cheaper, 3.9. He ran the second most routes in the entire league this past week. So he's going to be on the field a ton. And I'm not really asking him to do too much at that price point. So I get it. AB is a much better play. I just am a little scared of everybody going all in on the player. And he's got a tough matchup. Like, it's going to be Stephon Gilmore that's guarding him. So not the easiest thing in the world.
We have to see.
How do you feel about Tyler Johnson?
Yeah, I like Tyler Johnson a lot too. And I feel like what I was going to bring up was Brashad Perryman, who didn't play last week, but if he's back in the lineup this week, I think their 3 wide receiver set is going to be Perryman, Tyler Johnson, and AB. And I don't know like who would play which role in the offense. So it's really intriguing to kind of see where it goes. And I don't think we'll have a really strong lean like to know how to break down the targets. Do you?
No, not at all. I mean, I just want snaps, like pure snaps, and Tyler Johnson's just going to be out in the field a ton.
Yeah, and I was like betting on the younger, like better trajectory player at this point in the career. Brashad Perryman, we've seen have the lowest of the lows and kind of just been up and down all career.
Brashad Perryman looked like he was 48 when he entered the league. Like, he looked like an old man.
Confirmed.
So, all right, can I throw out one more name just so I can get this out of my system?
Please don't, but go ahead.
People, Betz was trying to troll me on the Twitter sphere. And you know what? I'm immune to that kind of stuff. Damiere Byrd is 3.3. This is a man who 2 weeks ago went 2 for 76 and a touchdown. And this past week on Monday night, he had 90% of the snaps, saw 6 targets, 3.3. It's cheap. That's all I'm saying is who is a cheap wide receiver just to put in your player pool. I'm not saying, but I am saying that you can at least add him in your player pool, and maybe we'll have a different conversation later on in the week, but he stood out. This is a salary standout segment, right?
Sure, yeah. Same as Adam Humphries. Just stood out like a sore thumb there. Great tag that week. You know, just a great play. Listen, buddy, I'll take the randos from here on out, okay? We're hitting with the Jamal Agnews of the world, the Duke Johnsons of the world. We need to make it a segment like Betts' Rando Player of the Week.
All right, well then hit me with a rando at tight end who's now possibly a punt play, and your name is going to be attached to this man.
All right, Noah Gray. Who? Who the heck is that? 2.5K. He is the backup tight end behind Travis Kelce. Actually, kind of an intriguing dynasty stash. Not a dynasty show, but dynasty stash behind the veteran Travis Kelce. So if Kelce is out and you get Noah Gray, he's taking on Pittsburgh. He's the Stone Min, 2.5K. On DraftKings, so he looks like a decent punt option if we get him, and especially without Tyreek Hill. And then, you know, the other name I'll throw out, Cole Kmet. We saw him have a really nice game in a negative game script last night for the Bears, but I feel like the issue is that we're putting a bunch of Bears players down, and they are not a good offense, so I'm a little scared of that. However, he's 3.2K. He's very cheap against Seattle.
Okay, so Noah Gray, I'm at least familiar in our prospect stuff. He went to Duke. He's at least big enough. Like, okay. But I think Cole Kmet and Mark Andrews are the 2 top tight ends. Cole Kmet just in terms of pure points per dollar and puntability. Like, I think he fits that mold. He's caught as many touchdowns as you, though, Betts. Realize that. Like, for a guy who's supposed to be a red zone dominator, Jimmy Grandpa is dominating him in terms of getting looks in the end zone. So 3.3 for Cole Kmet, 7K for Mark Andrews. That's too cheap. If Kelsey's out, then Andrews is going to be even more popular. And then I just need to mention CJ Uzomah because he went for 2 touchdowns against the Ravens earlier in the year. I think he's interesting. And then on FanDuel, Gronk is cheap. If everybody was out, let's say that Evans was out and Fournette's out and AB, you get a report of AB being like, all right, well, he's going to be on a snap count. How would you feel about Gronk this week?
Incredible. I mean, we saw him have, what did he have, 11 targets the other night?
Season high 11
Yeah,
targets.
I mean, it just didn't work out. He had a down game, dropped a couple.
2 catches, by the way.
Oh, yeah, that's not great. Not great efficiency there. But Tom's going to look to his best buddy over and over again if all those guys are out. So I would love Gronk this week if that was the case.
Yeah, 6.7 on FanDuel is a relative value. And let's finish off with defense. My Falcons are just standing out this week, just looking great. How do we feel about getting to 7 wins this week against the Lions, potentially minus Jared Goff?
Truthfully, not great after what they just did to the Cardinals last week. And with how much this team loves Dan Campbell and how much I love Dan Campbell. But if it's ever going to happen, man, this is the week. I'm going to be glued to this game, just watching the Falcons win like 13-7. So, yeah, man, the Falcons are a solid play, especially if we get Jared Goff out. 2.6, they're great. Also throughout defense, the Rams, 3.1. We talked about that game stack. We have seen the Vikings really struggle, especially on the offensive line, and Kirk Cousins have some egregious mistakes over the course of the season. So the Rams at 3.1, I think are at least interesting, more of a tournament play in my opinion.
The Raiders at 2.9 on DraftKings are solid, especially if it's going to be Drew Lock, because he's Drew Lock, and we like to laugh at him.
Oh, that was funny.
And the Eagles, 3.6, if you want to pay up a little bit more against Jake Fromm, Mike Glennon, whoever they are, is an awesome play. And then on FanDuel, I want to mention a couple of different names. The Steelers are way down there. They're the second lowest price defense, which is a sentence I don't think I'd ever say. They're the DST 21 on FanDuel. And if you knew that Kelsey and Hill were out, would you punt with the Steelers at 3.2 on FanDuel?
So it's always tough on FanDuel to punt because their pricing is generally pretty loose, that you can get up to the range of like 4K pretty comfortably, or sometimes even more. So I probably won't go there this week. I mean, if those guys are out, then maybe, and maybe the COVID situation gets worse and then they look a standout play, sure. But I don't think you necessarily need to prioritize them early in the week.
I just needed to mention them because I was going through the salaries. I was like, wow, the Steelers are just buried. And then the Bengals at 3.5 on FanDuel, great spot at home against the Ravens. And then, yeah, we mentioned the Falcons, they're great on both sites, 3.8 on FanDuel against the Lions. And here's the deal. I mean, Craig Reynolds has somehow rushed for 195 yards off the street the last 2 weeks. But can you really trust a Craig? I mean, do you know many people named Craig? Put it this way, Betz. You show me a Craig you trust, and I'll show you somebody else with a different name that I trust even more, to quote Michael Scott.
And the thing is, I'm thinking as you're talking, the only Craig I can think of is the Craig from Parks and Rec. So I don't know anyone else named Craig that I can trust, but maybe Craig Reynolds, man. We haven't talked about him on the show. Are we overlooking Craig Reynolds against the Falcons?
I'm not playing Craig Reynolds, especially if Jamal Williams is back this week. There's just way too many question marks. And I don't trust a Craig. No, I do have a couple of friends named Craig. I have a childhood really good friend named Craig, great guy, but you can't trust a Craig, man. That's where I'm at.
All right, fine. 26 carries last week. That's all I'm going to say.
Hopefully the Falcons can get that win. We get to 7, and we'll all be feeling pretty happy. You can go to ballersdfs.com, and it will direct you to our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS, Borg plus Betz, and you can join. This past week, I created a contest and completely misspelled the word all. It has 3 letters.
Saw that.
It said all. It said alm. But yeah, if you want to join us, you can be a part of that. Maybe we will have one of those smaller contests. I feel like those have been super fun when you and I have those small field ones and people find them super, super competitive. Should be fun. yes, you can enter in our Week 16 contest, and we would love to play with you. But Betz, why don't you sign off for the people?
Sure thing. Yes, it is going to be a wild week again, I'm sure, in the NFL as we look forward to Week 16, hopefully getting things back on track. I think a nice Christmas present for all of us this week is to win a GPP. So let's do that. We'll see you guys on Friday. Have a great week. And until then, we'll see you.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.